So, good yontif to all of you. Some things never change. Like there's never anybody sitting in the front row. And so, Rabbi Reeser, Temple Beth Shalom, you have to come early to get a seat in the last row. And then slowly it fills up, and actually, that's how I became rabbi. There was just no seats anywhere, so. Special treat also because, behind the scenes, our cantor Robin, Robin's daughter Jenny is singing in the temple choir this year. And her son Kobe is our tech guy, the man behind the screen. Yeah. So, and in the back, all the way, is Albie, So the whole family is here. I was going through my piles. 50 years of piles. How many of you have piles of papers? I said to Daniel, Daniel, do you have piles? He says, no, I have files. I have piles of papers. So I'm going through, 50 years of piles. And I came across this from a father of 3 sons in the congregation. A conversation in the back seat on the way to school this morning. And this is what the father sends to me. Eli, his older son, Dad, did you know that we cover the challah on Shabbat so that it doesn't get jealous when the wine gets blessed first? That way, when it's uncovered, the challah thinks it's getting blessed first. The father says, that sounds like a story Rabbi Schecter told you. A younger son says, how does Rabbi Schecter know so much? Was he a kid in the olden days? Well, there it was in the middle of a pile, and it went right through me. I was a kid in the olden days. And I still am a kid in the olden days. I imagine myself as a kid back then. Here were truths coming from the back seat of a car drive to school. You as parents and grandparents and caretakers, you drive your kids places, they're in the back seat of the car. How much do you learn? A lot. You get the truth. You get what's really going on. So what I'd like you to do is join me in the front seat, in the driver's seat. And in the back seat this morning, we're going to have 3 boys, Isaac, Ishmael, and Samuel. And we're going to hear what they would say as kids. What they saw happening to them is we've heard the adult version of it in so many ways this morning. Ishmael, Isaac's older son, brother. Ishmael says to Isaac, hey, Isaac, you look really pale this morning. What happened? And he said, Ishmael, you don't know? Our father almost killed me. We were out on a 3-day hike. We went up the mountain. Suddenly, I see him take out a knife. He binds me up. He hears some voice. He puts down the knife, and he leaves me bound on the mountaintop. And Ishmael is listening to this story. And Isaac continues. And he says, it's a good thing I had my cell phone with me. I was able to reach down and hit in my favorites, Grandpa Terach, our grandfather. And he came and he unbound me. And he said to me, I don't know why your father thought he had to start a new religion for this. And at that moment, Ishmael says, stop whining, Isaac. You Jews are always whining. Your mother, Sarah, told our father Abraham to oust me and my birth mom Hagar. And he said it was wrong. He knew it was wrong. It says so right in the Torah. But he did it anyway. And then I got thirsty. There I was in the desert. And my mom left me alone. And suddenly a messenger came and yelled to Hagar, Hagar, what's up with you? Open your eyes. Look at the water and give your son that water. I'm lucky to be alive, Isaac, just like you. At that moment, Samuel said, you guys have nothing to complain about. You both got home alive. Every time my mom, Hannah, leaves me someplace, I'm afraid she's never going to pick me up. How confused were these kids in the back seat by the behavior of their parents? It's a good thing there wasn't Child Protective Services back then. Let's go back to the front seat, where we are. There was a rabbi, Edwin Friedman, who wrote about parenting. And he said the phrase in loco parentis really means crazy like parents. And we understand that kind of mishigas. And I want to tell two stories to you, a synopsis of them, that kind of tell us something about parenting, so that the kids in the back seat might get a vision of what it's like being in the front seat. The late writer Raymond Carver, he wrote about one moment. He was up in Saratoga, and he was at a writers' conference. And he was in charge of his two boys. His wife was doing something. And the two boys were at a birthday party, and he was responsible for doing the laundry at the local laundromat. And it turns out that the laundromat is filled with people. He does the wash, takes it out of the washing machine, and now he's waiting for a dryer. There's no dryer available. And he's looking at his watch. He has to pick up his kids. And suddenly, a dryer stops. And a woman comes over and reaches her hand into the dryer. And then suddenly withdraws her hand, slams the door shut, and puts in another 25 cents. And he goes wild. All he says what happened at that moment was the realization that nothing mattered in this world more than his children and picking them up on time. The influence in his writing. This was real influence. This was the sun and the moon and the stars. And at that moment, he realized these were the years of ferocious parenting, is what he called it. Ferocious parenting. A parent's perspective. The other story by Tilly Olson, maybe some of you know it. She wrote in the 1930s, and this story is entitled, While I Stand Here Ironing. Tilly Olson is having an imaginary conversation with her daughter. She's like davening while she's ironing. I was trying to tell this story to some of the kids. They didn't know what an ironing board was. They also didn't know when I told them I used to drive a jalopy. You know, that's another. Tilly Olson is ironing and talking to her daughter, a magnificent story, a magnificent monologue as a dialogue. And then at the end of the story, she finally says, I only hope I don't try to iron out the wrinkles in your life the way this hot iron is going to iron out the wrinkles in your dress. What a story about parenting. And both stories about doing the laundry. One story being late for pickup, the other just trying to get the clothing ready so it can be worn. What is the perspective of the kids in all of this? And how do we have a meeting point with the perspective from those of us who are drivers? We're in the front seat. And so this story, it should ring a bell because it's the story of the pandemic. But it's a story that goes back 2,000 years about a sage. His name was Shimon ben Yochai. It was in the Roman period when the Torah could not be studied. And a period of terrible persecution and suffering in Judea. And Shimon cannot live without studying the Torah. He goes into a cave to study the Torah for a long period of time and not come out. A miraculous story, a midrash. He's in the cave for years studying. And finally he hears a voice say, Shimon, you can come out of your cave. The Romans are gone. You can study Torah once again in public. And Shimon comes out, and what does he see? He sees families celebrating. He sees children playing. They're in the fields. They're laughing. They're singing. And Shimon gets angry. He says, for this I studied Torah for years? And his eyes glared at everything that he saw. And in this midrash, there was thunder and lightning striking everywhere he looked. And the families dispersed out of fear from what they were hearing. And a divine voice came down to Shimon and said, Shimon, this is what you learned from studying Torah in the cave? Go back into the cave and spend more time studying the Torah. But this time, Shimon was allowed to take his son with him, to study with him. And the father and the son study Torah together. And when they finally come out of the cave once again, listen to the words at the end of this midrash. The son's eyes healed that which the father's eyes had destroyed. We, this year, as we come out of this pandemic, as we see the world that we live in, let's try to see the world through our children's eyes. Might their eyes heal a shattered world? A closing story about a little girl sitting in the back seat of the car. Her mother is driving. And the little girl asks, Mom, when we get to where we're going, where will we be? When we get to where we're going, where will we be? I humbly pass that question on to our new rabbi. And our cantor, and Kate. As one of the prophets said, when Elijah comes, V'heshiv lev avot al banim, v'lev banim al avotam. The hearts of the children shall be turned to their parents, and the hearts of the parents to their children. And we will know that the day of the Lord has come. Shana Tova.